in 44 BC, had outgrown its traditional city government. After a decade of war in Gaul and a victory in the Roman Civil War, Julius Caesar returned with the total loyalty of his legions, and authority shifted entirely into the hands of one man. In the early months of that year, the Senate appointed Caesar Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. In a society defined by elected term limits, this lifetime appointment ended the Republic's functioning tradition. For the Roman elite, the transition from a representative government to a permanent autocracy was complete. Tensions boiled over when a senatorial delegation arrived to present Caesar with new honors. He refused to stand, a severe breach of etiquette, signaling his disregard for the Senate. A royal diadem appeared. He stripped the tribune's offices, attacking the people's representatives. At the Lupercalia festival in February, Caesar's co-consul Mark Antony publicly offered him a crown. Though Caesar rejected it as the crowd watched in silence, the gesture confirmed the elite's fears. They saw a ruler actively testing public opinion to see if Rome was ready for monarchy. With every traditional check on power failing, the Senate's remaining option was force. The plot that followed was not a spontaneous riot, but a calculated countermeasure by men who believed killing the dictator was the only way to keep the Republic alive. Gaius Cassius Longinus acted as the calculating strategist behind the plot. Cassius was an experienced general who had survived the disastrous Parthian campaigns and fought against Caesar in the Civil War. His motivation was fueled by a mix of personal resentment over stalled career advancements and a desire to protect the elite status of the Senate. But Cassius had a perception problem. If a known rival murdered a popular leader, it would be viewed as a simple power grab. To rally the public and the remaining senators, the conspiracy required a leader with a reputation that was beyond reproach. He recruited his brother-in-law, Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus was respected for his devotion to Stoic philosophy and his family legacy. His ancestor was famously credited with overthrowing the last kings of Rome centuries earlier. By joining, Brutus transformed the plot from a personal vendetta into a perceived moral duty. To eliminate a leader as powerful as Caesar, the conspirators relied on this specific combination: Cassius's ruthless logistical engineering and Brutus's reputation for civic virtue. The conspirators systematically vetted a group of 60 to 80 senators for the attack. They targeted men near the age of 40, deliberately avoiding younger men they deemed too reckless, and older senators they feared were too slow. Each recruit was tested with innocent-sounding questions to gauge their willingness to take a lethal risk for the Republic. Two major figures were intentionally left out. The orator Cicero was considered too cautious to act with the necessary speed. Mark Antony was excluded because he had already rejected a previous attempt to join a conspiracy against Caesar the year before. This exclusion led to a tactical dispute. Cassius argued that Antony was Caesar's most dangerous supporter and a sitting consul. He insisted that Antony must be killed alongside Caesar to prevent him from leading a counterattack with the legions. Brutus rejected the plan. He argued that their goal was to remove a tyrant, not to conduct a political purge. He believed that killing Caesar's subordinates would make them look like common murderers rather than defenders of the law. Brutus eventually won the debate. By sparing Antony to maintain their moral standing, the conspirators left the most capable defender of Caesar's legacy standing. The conspirators initially considered an ambush on the Sacred Way or during a public election. However, Caesar traveled with a dangerous-looking entourage of friends who could interfere in a public space. They needed a venue that would isolate him. They settled on a Senate meeting at the Curia of Pompey on the Ides of March. The location was perfect because only senators were allowed inside. Caesar's entourage would have to wait in the portico, while the assassins could smuggle daggers under their togas and rely on their superior numbers within the chamber. Decimus Brutus, a close associate of Caesar who was also part of the plot, provided a final layer of security. He stationed a company of his own gladiators in the portico. If the senators were attacked after the murder, or if a rescue attempt was made, the gladiators would act as a private security force to cover the escape. The strength of the blueprint was that it turned Senate rules and traditions into a weapon. They used a venue dedicated to law and order to execute an assassination. On the morning of March 15th, Caesar nearly canceled his attendance. After a night of bad omens and a nightmare in which she held her murdered husband, his wife, Calpurnia, begged him to stay home. Caesar initially agreed and sent Mark Antony to dismiss the Senate. Decimus Brutus intervened. He went to Caesar's home and appealed to his pride, asking if he would really let his duties be dictated by a woman's dreams or the opinions of foolish men. Caesar was convinced and set out for the meeting. This strike was highly coordinated. Trebonius detained Antony outside the chamber to keep him from interfering. Inside, Tullius Cimber approached Caesar with a petition and pulled at his toga to pin his arms. As Caesar cried out, the Casca brothers struck the first blows, and the rest of the conspirators swarmed. Caesar fell at the base of a statue of his old rival, Pompey. He had been stabbed 23 times. In the immediate aftermath, the senators who were not part of the plot fled the Curia in terror, leaving the conspirators alone with the man they had just killed. As they cleaned their blades, the conspirators were met with an immediate, terrifying power vacuum that they had no plan to fill. They had removed the dictator, but they had not accounted for the chaos that would instantly follow. The assassins marched to the Capitoline Hill, shouting that Rome was free, expecting the public to celebrate. Instead, they found a city in lockdown. Romans had shuttered their homes, and the jubilation they expected was replaced by a tense, dead silence. The conspirators minted coins like this one, showing the daggers and a liberty cap to frame the murder as a public service. However, the lower classes viewed Caesar as their champion. They saw the assassination as an act of violence committed by a wealthy elite who had just murdered the man providing them with grain and land. The decision to spare Mark Antony and leave Caesar's political appointments in place proved catastrophic. It meant the entire Caesarian administration remained operational, giving his supporters the resources they needed to organize. Mark Antony used Caesar's funeral to turn the public's grief into rage against the conspirators. Simultaneously, Caesar's 18-year-old heir, Octavian, arrived in Italy and claimed his inheritance. Together with Antony and Lepidus, they formed the Second Triumvirate and began a systematic hunt for the assassins. The conspirators were defeated at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC, where both Brutus and Cassius took their own lives. Octavian would eventually emerge as the sole master of Rome, taking the name Augustus and establishing the Roman Empire. The assassination of Julius Caesar shows that tactical success is meaningless without a political plan for the aftermath. In their attempt to save the Republic by killing its dictator, the conspirators only succeeded in accelerating its death and the rise of the empire.